Okay, so picture this. It's 1983.
Oh, 1983.
Big hair, shoulder pads.
Reagan's in the White House.
MTV is just exploding.
And the stock market. Well, let's just say it's booming.
But in a swanky Philadelphia office, a bet is about to go down that's going to turn two lives completely upside down.
This is Trading Places.
A comedy classic.
That still packs a punch.
Today, we're going deep. We're going to figure out what makes it tick, why it's still relevant all these years later, and maybe even unearth some behind-the-scenes secrets.
What makes Trading Places so fascinating is how it manages to be hilarious and thought-provoking at the same time.
Right. It's a fish-out-of-water story.
But also a sharp commentary on class and privilege.
And the American dream?
It's like they took a buddy comedy and sprinkled it with social justice fairy dust.
Exactly. Okay, so for those who haven't seen it or need a refresher, we've got Eddie Murphy playing Billy Ray Valentine,
A streetwise hustler.
who's about to get a taste of the high life.
And then there's Dan Aykroyd as Louis Winthrop III,
The epitome of privilege.
born with a silver spoon in his mouth.
Commodities broker, living the good life.
And the masterminds behind this whole crazy switcheroo,
The Doof brothers.
played by Donna H. and Ralph Bellamy.
Deliciously evil.
They basically make a bet. They decide to swap Billy Ray and Louise's lives just to see what happens.
A social experiment disguised as a prank.
And chaos ensues.
Louis, totally clueless about life outside his bubble, is suddenly thrust into the streets.
While Billy Ray is trying to navigate the world of high finance.
But he's dropping one-liners that are still quoted today.
It's more than just laughs, though.
Oh, absolutely. The brilliance is how they use these over-the-top situations to expose how absurd some of our social structures really are.
Like that scene where Billy Ray's in Louis' luxurious apartment wearing a bathrobe and answers the door.
Looking good, Billy Ray.
It's comedy gold.
That was improvised, wasn't it?
It was pure genius.
And it perfectly captures Billy Ray's transformation,
He's claiming his space.
defying all those expectations placed on him because of his background.
Exactly. It's a small moment,
Yeah.
but it speaks volumes about the film's message.
It's not just about two guys switching places.
It's about challenging those preconceived notions,
showing that potential can come from anywhere.
no matter your background.
And speaking of defying expectations, can we talk about Jamie Lee Curtis for a second?
Oh, please, She completely shatters her Scream Queen image with this role.
Ophelia, a quick-witted sex worker who ends up being a key ally to Louis.
She brings this incredible warmth and sass to the character.
Ophelia could have been so one-dimensional.
But she's written with such depth.
And agency.
She defies stereotypes and becomes a major player in the whole scheme.
And she does it all while rocking some killer 80s fashion.
Absolutely.
But we can't forget the villains of the story. The Duke brothers.
They're like caricatures of greed and entitlement.
But they're so well acted that you almost find yourself rooting for them.
Almost.
Their villainy is really key to the film's satire.
They represent a system where wealth equals power and superiority.
And they use that to justify manipulating and exploiting everyone around them.
And the film doesn't let them get away with it.
Right. Which is why it's so satisfying to watch their carefully constructed world come crashing down.
It's pure karmic justice when Billy Ray and Louis team up and outsmart the Dukes.
It's like Robin Hood, but with shoulder pads and quotable lines.
Trading Places manages to weave social commentary into this hilarious package.
It makes you think while you're laughing.
It does. Okay, so we've set the scene, met our players, and gotten a glimpse of the brilliance. But here's where things get interesting.
The film doesn't just present these issues, it makes you ask some tough questions.
Like, are we truly in control of our own destinies?
Or are we just pawns in a game controlled by those in power?
That's the question, and that's where we're headed next.
We're going to explore how Trading Places tackles that slippery slope of social mobility.
And whether its message still holds true in today's world. Stay with us. Welcome back to our deep dive into Trading Places. Remember that question we left you with?
Are we calling the shots in our own lives?
Or are we just pieces being moved around on someone else's game board?
Right, like are we masters of our fate or...
Just pawns in a bigger game? Trading Places really makes you think about that?
Okay, so let's break it down. You've got Louis, born with a silver spoon.
Fancy education, connections.
You'd think he'd be set for life.
You'd think so, right?
But then everything gets taken away.
And he crumbles.
He doesn't know how to hustle or how to make it without his money and his status.
It's almost like all that supposed merit was just being in the right place at the right time.
Which is kind of a scary thought, right?
It is. Makes you wonder how many people are coasting on advantages they didn't actually earn.
And then on the flip side, you've got Billy Ray, this incredibly smart and resourceful guy.
But he keeps hitting walls because of his background.
It's like the film is saying that even if you're talented and driven, it might not be enough.
The system is built to hold certain people back.
Right. There are roadblocks in place based on who you are, where you come from.
And it's almost like a Greek tragedy.
But with a lot more slapstick.
Yeah.
So is there any hope? Or is this film just super depressing?
No, there's hope.
Yeah.
Both Billy Ray and Louis, they find a way to reclaim their agency.
They use what they've learned about themselves and about each other's worlds to turn the tables.
They figure out how to play the game.
It's like they each had a piece of the puzzle the other one needed.
Louis learned how to fight for himself.
And Billy Ray gets to use his smarts on a larger scale.
And in the end, they expose the Duke brothers.
They prove that even in a system that feels rigged, you can make a difference.
There's human will.
Resilience.
And maybe a little bit of luck. But is that realistic? Can we all bank on a lucky break?
That's what makes the film so interesting. It shows how tough things are.
But it doesn't completely shut the door on hope.
It's not saying everyone can go from rags to riches.
But it's also not saying we're totally powerless.
So Trading Places is making us think about the system,
Asking questions.
but not necessarily giving us all the answers.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a starting point for a bigger conversation.
And that's what elevates it beyond just a comedy, right? It stays with you, makes you think.
It does. But let's not forget about the comedy. Like
Yeah.
that scene on the train where Billy Ray gets stuck with a gorilla.
Oh, man, that's a classic.
Eddie Murphy at his best. He takes this totally absurd situation
And turns it into this hilarious commentary on cultural misunderstandings.
and a lot of that scene was improvised. Pure genius.
So Billy Ray, he's not just funny.
He's quick on his feet.
He turns a disaster into a moment of connection.
He's adaptable, like a chameleon.
And he uses humor as his weapon.
He has to, right? To navigate a world with so many crazy rules and expectations.
It makes you think, maybe that's what we all need. Resourcefulness,
Look
resilience,
for a little bit of audacity.
but also remembering that even when things are chaotic.
there's always room for human connection.
And that brings me to Jamie Lee Curtis as Ophelia. I mean, she could have just been the love interest.
Right, the damsel in distress. But she ends up being so much more than that. She's smart, she's strong, she makes her own choices.
She's not waiting for anyone to rescue her. She jumps right into the game.
And her relationship with Louis.
It's not just about romance.
It's about respect, about seeing each other as equals.
And that's another thing that makes Trading Places so interesting. It's a product of its time.
But it has these moments of progressive thinking that still feel relevant.
It's like they're saying, hey, even in this crazy world, let's remember that human relationships are complex.
And that genuine connection matters.
Exactly. And that's part of what makes this film so enduring.
It makes you laugh.
It makes you think.
And it stays with you.
It does. So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, we're left with one final question.
What's the lasting impact of Trading Places?
Does its message still hold up in today's world? And that, my friend, is where we'll pick up next.
Okay, so we've laughed, we've thought hard, maybe we've even questioned a few things about ourselves. But as we wrap up this deep dive into Trading Places, I keep coming back to its impact, you know? What kind of mark did this film leave on the world?
Well, it was huge EE.
Oh, for sure. A box office smash.
One of the biggest movies of 1983. People were really craving this mix of comedy and social commentary.
Yeah, it wasn't just a hit, it was like a phenomenon.
It really was. People were quoting the lines, wearing those power suits.
It totally captured the energy of the 80s.
That time of like excess and ambition. It held up a mirror to society, started conversations about who has power, who has wealth.
And those conversations are still happening today, right? I mean, haven't we always struggled with these things?
Always. Income inequality, social mobility, all that stuff.
It feels like Trading Places planted a seed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And those seeds have grown into these bigger discussions about equality, about justice. Look at the conversations we're having now.
About wealth disparity.
The Occupy Wall Street movement, Black Lives Matter.
These are all connected to what the film was talking about back then.
They really are. And think about the impact on Eddie Murphy's career.
Oh, man. He became a superstar.
He showed off his incredible comedic talent, his ability to improvise, to make us laugh, while also making us think. And Jamie Lee Curtis.
She proved she could do comedy just as well as horror.
She broke out of that box.
It's amazing that a movie about two guys switching lives could have such a huge impact on Hollywood and beyond.
I know, right?
But that's the thing about great storytelling.
And you combine humor and heart and intelligence.
And you're willing to push boundaries.
You create something that lasts, that connects with people across generations.
And that's Trading Places, for sure. It makes you laugh until you cry.
But it also sticks with you.
Makes you think about your own place in the world.
Which is what art is supposed to do, right? Make you think.
Challenge you, inspire you.
Exactly. So as we wrap up our deep dive,
One last thought for you.
Trading Places reminds us that life is unpredictable, full of surprises.
Full of twists and turns.
But even when the odds seem stacked against you,
There's always a reason to hope.
and to find the humor in it all.
So maybe this film will inspire you to shake things up a bit in your own life, question the status quo, or just embrace the absurdity of it all.
Whatever you take away from it, we hope you've enjoyed this journey back to 1983.
And maybe you found a new appreciation for this hilarious and insightful film.
We've had a blast talking about it.
And remember, keep those questions coming, keep exploring, keep diving deep. Until next time.